As you guys know, I'm still over here in Cape Town, but Bitcoin is looking prime for higher targets this week, so I had to share this Bitcoin update and long position with you guys today. Before I dive into the lower time frame execution for our long position on Bitcoin, we first gotta understand the higher time frame context. And what we can see over here is that Bitcoin is indeed still range bound, and as long as it is range bound, we are trading this range until it breaks. Now, last week we saw something very interesting. On Monday last week, we saw a huge candle to the downside. Now, why was this candle to the downside so interesting? Because when we got this candle to the downside, what Bitcoin was doing was filling this major wick to the downside right over here. Now, when we mark out this 50% wick fill level, and we know that these 50% wick fill levels are always a draw on liquidity, we can see that exactly from that 50% wick fill level, Bitcoin saw a major bounce and closed the candle in the green as a green bullish hammer candlestick. Now we know that usually, as I said, these wicks always get filled. And then you might think, okay, Jip, but over here we have another major wick to the downside. Shouldn't we fill that one for 50% as well? And the answer is very simple. It's no, because this wick over here was filling the wick right over here, and therefore this wick over here, the last wick that we put in last Monday, carries no significance at all. Now, many people don't know this, and this is where things become very interesting to me, because if I mark out the 50% wick fill level of this second wick right over here, and I go to the 1 hourly time frame, then we can see that we slightly front run that wick right over here. So while everyone was waiting for that 50% wick fill level, and trust me guys, many people had their long order ready right over here, exactly at the 50% wick fill level, with their stop loss right over here beneath the low, targeting the range high, because everyone was talking about 50% wick fill level. We actually were front running that 50% wick fill level, and instead we saw a bounce after that front run, which means that everyone that was waiting for that 50% wick fill level, and trust me, there were a lot of people waiting, they all got front run, and now the price of Bitcoin is finding its way towards the upside. Now, what we can see over here is that around the range high level we have 1, we have 2, we have 3, and we have a 4th high lining up, engineering and generating lots of liquidity around the range high, which means that we have seen a bounce from the range low level, and now we should be targeting that range high liquidity pool, which means that we can start looking for low time frame long executions and long triggers. When we look at the lower time frame chart for Bitcoin, I absolutely love it. What we can see over here is that Bitcoin saw a strong push to the downside. Correct? After the strong push to the downside, we saw a push to the upside right over here. Now, this is very interesting on itself already, because while we were getting the push to the downside over here, we can see that we had a significant low right over here. Why was this a significant low? Because there was plenty of liquidity resting beneath the low, due to the fact that the price of Bitcoin was pushing over here above these highs, creating a fake break of structure. Now, because Bitcoin was pushing above these highs, creating a fake break of structure, it was engineering a lot of liquidity beneath the low over here.
Did you know that Cape Town is one of the oldest trading ports? Speaking of trading, make sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on any of my trading related updates.
Which means that as soon as we take out that low, with a wick, with a candle open, with a candle close, that's completely irrelevant, aka right over here, the low that takes out this wick over here becomes a significant low, and the high that we form after that low becomes a very significant high to break. So therefore, we mark out this lower high, and this lower high over here gave us this push to the downside, gave us this flush to the downside, and therefore this was a very significant high to break. So once we were opening closing candles over here above this high, I already started to become interested in longs for Bitcoin. In this case, our invalidation for our bullish thesis was beneath this low right over here, because this was the lowest low that we formed before this push to the upside, that then gave us not only this valid break of structure, but also a high probability break of structure. But I wanted to see another confirmation. I wanted Bitcoin to first form a higher low over here, provide me with some extra confirmation before I'm interested in longs. And now it looks like, guys, that we have indeed seen that confirmation right now, both market structure wise, liquidity wise, and statistics wise, which I will go over on later in today's video. Now, what is important to get that extra trigger, to get that extra confirmation, is to analyze the structure that we were forming right over here. And now what we can see is that Bitcoin was entering another downtrend with a low, lower high, lower low, lower high, and then over here we form another lower low. Now, what was interesting to me is that after this lower low that we form,
the price of Bitcoin saw an aggressive push to the upside and gave us a fake break of structure over here. Why was this a fake break of structure, guys? Look at how the candle closes above that high, but we don't open and close candles above that significant high over here, and therefore it's a fake break of structure. Now get into the mind of the retail traders. They're once again opening up breakout long positions over here for Bitcoin, for example targeting the highs over here, and they need a low to cover their stop loss, and obviously all of them are going to use the low that initiated that impulse that gave us that fake break of structure, aka the low over here, making that a very significant liquidity low. Once we take out that low, the low that takes out that low, aka the low over here, becomes a significant low. Now after forming that low, we get this push to the upside. Bear with me now, this is interesting price action. And while getting the push to the upside, we get this fake break of structure once again over here. Therefore, there's so many liquidity resting beneath the low over here and also beneath the low right over here. So once we get this local liquidity sweep, this high over here becomes a significant high to break because it brings us to a lower low compared to the low that brought us to that high, and therefore this is not only a valid local break of structure that we are looking at, but it's also a high probability break of structure that we are looking at, and therefore all of a sudden our invalidation for our bullish thesis moves from this low to this low, and also since we have our second confirmation, the probabilities of looking for longs are much higher. We also can't forget to have a look at the weekly timing and weekly distance statistics, because what we can see over here for the weekly timing statistics is that Bitcoin formed the weekly low, for now the weekly P1 on a Monday, which is very often the case, and we formed the weekly P2, aka the current weekly high for now, on a Tuesday. We also formed the weekly P1 during the Asia session, which is something that happens about 38.2% of the time, and we formed the current weekly P2 during the Asia session as well, which is something that happens very rarely, about 19.7% of the time. So the weekly timing statistics are also showcasing that Monday's low has a high probability to hold, and that it's very likely to form the weekly high either on Thursday, on Friday, Saturday or Sunday, but most of the time we form the weekly high on Thursday, Friday or Sunday, as we can see percentage wise. So that means that if you get a pullback today on Tuesday or Wednesday, you can find yourself an invalidation below Monday's low and target new weekly highs on Thursday, Friday or Sunday. Over here we have Monday's low, and over here we have Monday's high, which means that based off the weekly timing statistics, as I said, it's very likely to hold Monday's low, so we can tighten our potential invalidation for our long position to the low right over here, which means that we have an even tighter invalidation. And as I said, guys, we can start looking for longs up on a pullback today on Tuesday or up on a pullback tomorrow on Wednesday. Now, as I have taught you guys, we always want to enter where other people are getting stopped out, and if we have now found our invalidation over here, all that is left right now for us is to look for potential execution where other people will get wrecked. Now what I can see over here is interesting, because we have a flat daily open over here. The daily candle opens over here, but we have no pullback. We are straight pumping towards the upside, which means that there is no daily wick being created to the downside for Bitcoin, and it's very likely to take out a daily candle open either today or tomorrow. So this is my first round liquidity, and more locally we can also see that we have a fake break of structure over here, which is engineering some more liquidity beneath this higher low over here. So for now this is definitely my first round liquidity for Bitcoin. Now when we go to the 5-minute time frame, we can also see that Bitcoin over here saw an aggressive push towards the upside with a lot of imbalances. Now I think many people have been FOMOing into longs up on this aggressive push to the upside, and also if we get a flush, a lot of people will probably be looking for longs within this imbalanced move. They are also looking for an invalidation. And now when I zoom in more locally over here, we can see that we have a bunch of lows that are lining up. And I've taught you guys that you always want to pick the first out of those lows for the most amount of liquidity. So I've marked out that low, and I will be using that low for my safety order. So let's say our first entry fails and Bitcoin is indeed going down lower, and is going to visit that liquidity pool instead of reversing after taking out the lows right over here. Then I'll be looking for a second DCA entry right over here up on the sweep of this low time frame low on a 5-minute time frame. So eventually the setup will look something like this, in which I'm looking for one more pullback today or tomorrow, or maybe even on Thursday, to get a sweep of that flat daily candle open. I'll be looking to build my long position right over here for Bitcoin before a reversal towards the upside, and this will be my first intermediate target before I'm targeting that high time frame range high.